Hi, I'm Arif Fahrudin. Welcome to Asian Agribiz Podcast, bringing you interviews and update from the animal protein community throughout Asia from a dedicated provider of news and information. In this series, Payungsak Wiryabundit is speaking with David Hughes about value creation in Asia's egg industry. David Hughes is Emeritus Professor of Food Marketing at Imperial College London, United Kingdom.
Hello, Professor.
Good morning. Well, it's my morning. I know it's your afternoon.
Yes, it's my afternoon in this. Thank you so much for talking to me in this podcast, Professor.
You're very welcome. I'm delighted to do so.
Okay, let's start. According to one report, Asia Pacific was the largest region in the global egg market, accounting for 64% of the market last year. So, Professor, what can drive growth and opportunities in Asia eggs industry?
And you're right. In terms of egg consumption globally, Asia is the biggest area. But of course, it's always going to be the biggest area because it's got China. And
Yes.
whenever you have 1.4 billion people, as you do in China, and what's more, they like eating eggs, then that's going to make Asia the largest eating region in the world. But so that's point one. Point two, how can you drive growth and opportunities in Asia's egg industry? I think it depends on the market. To start off with, I wouldn't be too taken up with driving volume. I think it would be just as important to try and drive value. So we don't want to commoditize eggs because they're already pretty commoditized. We need to try and build value to get eggs to be worth more, to add more to eggs so that they have more value to consumers. And as I said, it depends on what part of Asia. Because if we park China for the moment and say, okay, China eats a lot of eggs, it's going to be wherever you are in a country where egg consumption is high, then it's going to be that much more difficult to drive growth because consumption is already at a high level. So if you look at Asia, you've naturally got to look at India, where India with the similar population, 1.4 billion, but a substantially lower egg consumption than, say, China, well, actually substantially lower consumption of eggs than almost all Asian countries. But egg consumption has been growing very quickly. I would start with a market where there's a clear area for growth, and don't start with a market where the growth has already happened. What would interest me in Asia, if I look at size of markets, first of all, where are the population and where are the population growing? Or opportunity to drive it further. And again, you go back to India. I think if we look right across Asia, eggs have a good image in general, that they're viewed as being strong on nutrition, and that's excellent. Also, that irrespective of the country, I think eggs have relatively little cultural constraints. There isn't so strong religious reasons not to eat eggs, for example. And eggs are brilliant because they're child friendly. You've got that sort of low price protein, and kids will eat eggs in any country that I know of. So, however, we are in a period of COVID. I think Asia, relatively speaking, has come off quite lightly to date, apart from India. And I know in Thailand, suddenly you've got a tick up in COVID-19, but still it's very modest relative to most parts of the world. But I think a problem related to COVID-19, how does that relate to eggs? Well, it's suppressed income. And I think whenever you're in a market where household income is suppressed, then that's a great opportunity for eggs because they will be the most economic source of protein. So there we go. But back to my first point, don't look just to grow volume, look to grow value. That's more important because if you commoditize eggs, then you will drive it down to its lowest price, and then that will be reflected in low margin to producers.
So you mentioned India has a high potential, although India now facing quite a severe COVID situation now. But you also see, in post-COVID, you see potential growth for India, right? For egg market.
Absolutely. Even though it's seen they've close to doubled their egg consumption over a relatively short period of time, like, only about 10 years, but it still puts it low on a per capita basis relative to most Asian countries, relative to, for example, Indonesia. So there's still huge potential in India.
And apart from India, what other country in Southeast Asian country that you see as promising egg market, Professor?
Look, I don't want to say that eggs are poor people's food, but as I mentioned, because they're much, much more than that. We ought to, look at the region, look at what we expect to see in terms of economic growth and income growth. And particularly where you find countries where a fair proportion of the population are going to be constrained in their income, then that just gives more opportunities for, just to repeat, the most competitively priced sources of protein that you can find, which are eggs. So you look across so China recovering well, but as I said, they're already at a high rate of egg consumption. If we look across ASEAN, you'll know better than me. Where would we expect to see the most serious income constraints? Certainly, immediately to the country, to a country which has its own political problems. For example, Myanmar. Income is going to be low. There's going to be nutritional problems. There are opportunities there for eggs. And also Thailand. I mean, your egg consumption in Thailand is relatively high, but I think you're in a difficult period over the next 2-3 years. Tourism will be right down, so that pulls away demand for egg, which is for all premium foods actually, and that's going to suppress demand in Thailand. But Thai incomes are going to be down. It's a brilliant opportunity to promote eggs as the most nutritious and the most affordable sources of protein.
So let's move to another question, Professor Hughes. Premium and designer eggs are gaining traction, as you say, that producer want to increase value added. So where do you see demand for designer and premium eggs in Asia, and how can producer leverage this?
Good question, because every market is, I would say, in Asia, actually around the world, every market is increasingly segmented. There isn't a market for eggs in one country. There is a selection of markets. And often as not, what that reflects is income differentials within a country. You've got relatively poor people and you've got relatively high income people, and they can afford different things. So for example, if let's go back to China, where we've seen such an advance in household income over a relatively short period of time, let's say over the last 10 years, that if we went back to 2010 in China, then the mass market, if you will, which would be for relatively low income people, was huge. But let's fast forward to 2020. And now when I look at the Chinese market for eggs, or indeed for any food product, you've got this sort of, at the top, there are those who will pay a premium for very high quality, very healthy products. There's a middle to high premiumization part of the market. There's still the mass market. And then down the bottom, there's a low end, which is particularly price sensitive. And so when I'm talking about eggs in particular, but it could be for any foods, I'm saying, you have to look at where is the margin from a producer point of view. For eggs, the margin is not in an egg. An egg is the noun. The margin is in the adjectives that you associate with that noun. So, well, what sort of eggs? Is it free-range eggs? Pasture-fed? Is it local? Is it a particular breed? Is it organic? Is it omega-3 rich? Is it and you can already see across Asia that this sort of segmentation is already happening. In Thailand, for example, if you take let's take Better Grow brand with its S pure eggs. We have particularly pure eggs. They are free from hormones, free from, et cetera, et cetera. So I would expect to see in all markets this segmentation, and it will have eggs at the top end, very likely maybe 4 or 5 times more expensive than eggs down the bottom, which are just the commodity eggs. And the trick from an egg producer point of view is saying, what are the key segments? How big are they? What appeals to consumers in each of the segments? What are people willing to pay more for? For eggs, as I said, those are the adjectives. Is it free range? Is it traditional breed? Is it vegetarian fed? Is it organic? Is it a specific farmer? Is it an omega-3? Is it a happy egg? And then also, actually, almost all consumers want, I say again in my talks, they want their eggs to be free. And what do I mean by that? Well, they want them to be antibiotic free. They want to be hormone free. They want them to be additive free. And in many cases, they will pay more for those. They want it avian influenza free. They want it salmonella free, E. coli free. So if you follow my drift. There's such an opportunity to segment the overall market, but it does require a level of marketing skills and in some cases, marketing resources that many companies don't have at the moment.
As you say, Professor, for premium and value egg, consumer approval is, key for success. And what should producer do to win consumer in terms of, branding and marketing?
Right. Well, as I said, you need some experience. First of all, you need some experience in branding, and you certainly need resources. And as you'll know, that makes it challenging for small scale outfits, smaller scale producers, if you will. However, having said that, in a very local market, any producer, even if they are resource constrained, that they don't have marketing budgets, can work closely with the local market itself to differentiate themselves from the commodity market. Just in the most simplistic way, I think in particular, relating their product to how it's produced, to creating that sort of, that perception, that image that they are a caring farmer who is concerned about the consumer, who produces a safe and tasty egg. Even a small scale guy can do that, particularly if he or she is focused on a very specific local market. But generally, when we talk about brands, that's for larger companies that have some marketing budget, that have taken the time to look at the overall market, as I mentioned, to identify what are key segments, to work out what do higher income consumers value and willing to pay more for. Can I produce a product that I can place in that category? And then how can I communicate that to the consumer? I think a problem for many egg producers is that actually, particularly if they're selling through supermarkets, that once they've sold, if you will, their eggs to the supermarket itself, they've lost control. And then supermarkets put it on shelves, and often the communication of the benefits are lost, if you will, because in Asia is rather better as a region than most regions of the world, but in general, supermarket retailing of eggs is poor. It doesn't it doesn't celebrate what eggs can offer in terms of being a great food. And I think, again, for bigger companies, they can work with supermarkets and say, let's together develop some theater around the sale of my rather special eggs. And that will generate particular interest in your consumers, which will be good for the supermarket and good for the producer.
They should work with the supermarket, right? In terms of specialized display or categorizing packaging, right?
Rather than just lumping eggs on a shelf and saying to the shopper, work it out for yourselves, I think retailers have this real challenge that they they have to have a degree of expertise in category management. Just think, go to a big C in Thailand. How many different types of eggs will they have in the egg section? I don't know, but they might have 10 different ones. And often as not, they're not presented in a way that makes it easy for the egg shopper to shop. You need to have, here's the sort of relatively low priced eggs, and then moving through the category, these are higher priced eggs, and then making it quite clear to the shopper why you're asking them to pay more for eggs. So that comes down to how they are merchandised in the supermarket itself, and then how they are packaged, which is the producer's challenge, to get the right package, rather than just putting them into a gray box or a plastic box, which increasingly upsets the consumer anyway, because they don't want to be dealing with more and more plastic.
Okay, that's interesting, Professor. You talk about adjective, free range, particular, blend, organic. There are many adjectives, some designer contain, high vitamin, omega. So I know this is a generalized question, but which adjective do you think will become more and more popular in Asia, Professor?
First of all, free range. What is intriguing is that free range means different things in different markets. So, for example, in the UK, a long way from Asia, free range eggs are seen as being a benefit for the hens. The hens have an opportunity to roam in the pasture, and so they're, so it's good for the hens, because in the UK we're concerned about hen welfare. Now let's go to say China, where free range is seen as a particular consumer benefit. Free range means they are safer eggs, that the hens haven't been force-fed hormones and antibiotics. So, again, the adjectives mean different things in different markets. But if I look at Asia overall, I would have thought free range would probably come at the top of the list. Also increasingly local. If we look at, as we move into more industrialized agribusiness economies, then this sort of big food, big factories frighten many consumers, and they like the idea that it's produced locally from people that know us. So, so free range, local. I think the type of feed becomes important. Why? Because again, that's linked to consumer health. This concern that they were the hens, were they fed just vegetarian-based feed, or was it sort of old meat products, all minced up, and concerns about that. So I think the type of feed is something to identify. For some, organic, who are concerned about pesticides or animal health-related products. For a small proportion, I think the particular health benefits might strike a chord. So, for example, omega-3, as you mentioned, so that comes down to, again, what type of feed. But oddly enough, in many markets, omega-3 appeals only to a relatively small proportion of people. Again, it depends. That's for the local market to do just some very basic local market research and asking people, what do you want to see in your eggs? What's the best egg for you? What would make a great egg? And it's amazing, even for small businesses, how much you can learn about what consumers want from your product if you actually talk to your consumer. What are their concerns, and can we produce an egg which overcomes those concerns?
Professor Hughes, now online retail is expanding in many countries in Asia. So how this can help in moving consumer up in the value chains for egg?
That's a good question. And actually, Asia, or some Asian countries, are well ahead on online retailing than many other countries outside Asia. If I look again right across Asia, then China in particular, as ever, but also South Korea, the online is high. I would bet, I don't know, probably Singapore too would be high. Does it help eggs to be sold online? It can and it can't. What does that mean? Well, I'll give you an example. Back to the UK, hardly Asia. But if I go on to Tesco.com, and you know Tesco in Asia, after all, before it sold out, it was in Thailand and in Malaysia, etc. Tesco.com in the UK has 30 plus different fresh egg products on its website every week. And when I get onto Tesco online to buy my eggs, because I do buy online from Tesco, it's completely confusing. There are two electronic pages of eggs. They're in no particular order. It's not so cheaper through to more expensive or ranked by, adjectives. It's completely confusing. So in that particular case, all you do is make the shopping for eggs more difficult online. And so again, it comes down to actually category management, which unfortunately, that's the role of the retailer. But the retailer often needs help from a good supplier saying, look, this is how you should present eggs online. Make it easy for consumers to shop the egg category. And if you do that, you can move people through the really cheap through to the more expensive, just by making it quite clear which is, okay, here's the cheap one. And, you may wish to buy cheap, but here is the more expensive one. And then making it quite clear why they're more expensive. So, it's a mixed bag. So putting them online certainly doesn't automatically improve your chances of selling your product.
Yes, so category management and the role of the online platform is important, right?
Yes, yeah. And it always has been. And, but I say, particularly as you make the egg category more complex, then it has to be presented in a way that is just easy for people to shop. Remember, in most cases, when people are shopping for their food, particularly online, the sort of people who do that, often they're very busy, they've got jobs, they've got children, and they don't say eggs, I'm going to give myself 5 minutes now to take a decision on buying eggs. They want to buy eggs, bang, 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 because they're going to buy 30 other products as well. You've got to help them make the right decision. And that comes down to better category management.
Professor, another trend is emerging, which is plant-based eggs. So where do you see demand for plant-based eggs in Asia going?
Right. Again, let's take it on a more sort of, first of all, more global context that there's a lot of interest around the world in plant-based proteins in general. Plant-based eggs are lower down that list relative to, say, plant-based meats, I would suggest. But still, you can see, actually, the company that is doing the most development in this is an American company, which you will know, which is called Eat Just. And I noticed that, for example, in Singapore, Eat Just and Proterra Investments are setting up it's the wrong word really, but fake egg factory, if you will. So a factory making liquid egg products actually from mung beans. What that tells me is that investors believe that there is potential for plant-based eggs in Asia. What do I think about that? I think there is potential, but now it's small. I think it's relatively small in other parts of the world too, but it will grow. Would I want to be the first to be investing in plant-based eggs? I think that's pretty risky. Why? Because you have a very good supply of eggs with some good egg producers at very affordable prices. And I think plant-based eggs are going to be a niche market for those who are higher income and have particular concerns, relating to, perhaps to the environment or animal welfare. But I think it's a relatively small market. Mind you, there are other reasons why people might go plant-based. So let's move to India, for example, where as we all know, there's a relatively high proportion of people who are vegetarian and many who at least claim to be vegan. And if you're vegan, then you shouldn't be. Then eggs aren't on the menu. I notice in India, Evo Foods, for example, have developed a plant-based egg product. So it depends where you are, but I would suggest that market, don't panic if you're in the regular egg business, because you're not going to be swamped by plant-based eggs. They will be a niche product. They will be relatively high value, and it will be for a small, higher income group of consumers.
That's really compelling. Thank you so much for your time today, Professor. I learned a lot from you.
Thank you for listening to another Asian Agribiz podcast. Don't forget to subscribe to the show on Spotify, Apple Music, or wherever you get your podcasts.